All right. Thanks for supporting me. I know this will be taped, and so people will be able to view this online, but I like to have a live audience too. If you guys have any questions as I go through this today, let me know. To introduce myself, my name is Susan Looney. I'm with Insight HR Strategies. We are a small HR consulting firm that works with small to medium-sized organizations, typically that don't have an HR person, but I do work with some that do and help support their activities. Today, we're going to talk about the Fair Labor Standards Act. Many of you may have heard that the updates, the law that was, or the Department of Labor, the regulations that were put into place this year have been overturned. That happened November 14th. Just a week or so ago, a district judge in Texas said it was the Department of Labor did not have the authority to pass these regulations, and so he has stopped it and reverted it back. So there was a piece that went into effect in July that is no longer in place. So we'll talk more specifically about what those were. But I do think that this topic is relevant still because there still is minimum wage, overtime, and record keeping requirements under the Fair Labor Standards Act. I also think that there's a lot of misconceptions out there that we'll talk about. And the exempt, non-exempt issue is a big one, and how do we determine that? So that's still there, but the salary threshold is not going to go up. So we're going to talk about that today too. So again, if you guys have any questions at any time, let me know. So the Fair Labor Standards Act is one that is governed by the Department of Labor, the Wage and Hour Division. And this one has been in place for quite some time. They oversee minimum wage, overtime pay, record keeping, and youth employment standards. I'm not going to really focus on the child labor issues. Texas has child labor laws too, and so does the Fair Labor Standards Act, but I'm going to be focusing on the first three. Now, who's covered by the Fair Labor Standards Act? You may hear some laws out there, you have to have 15 employees and so forth. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, if you have employees, but if your workers engage in interstate commerce, so if you're buying and selling and shipping stuff across state lines, a bank or a financial institution, they're getting stuff from the Fed, that's across state lines. Typically, most employers are going to fall under there. Usually they look at you have revenue of 500,000 or more. But if you are, again, doing things interstate, you're usually going to fall within this rule. So most employers are covered. Now, under the Fair Labor Standards Act, what is compensation? So if we're going to use that word compensation, regular rate of pay, that includes wages, which is if you're getting salary, if you're getting hourly, piece rates, you're getting paid to each widget you produce, commissions and bonuses, incentives. Now, I may use the word bonus and incentive interchangeably, but in reality, I look at an incentive as something that if you do this, it's like a carrot. If you do this, I'm going to give you this. That's typically what an incentive is. A bonus can be that, but a bonus could be, hey, you know what? You did a good job. I'm going to give you $500. I'm going to give you a gift certificate. If you offer room and board, that's included in compensation. I don't know of anyone that I know in the chamber that offers that to their employees. So under the Fair Labor Standards Act, employers when they say I'm going to pay you $10 an hour, that's what they get paid. There is restrictions on what you can deduct from their pay. Of course, they're going to have taxes taken out. But let's say you have a uniform, and you're saying, I'm going to buy you one, and then you're going to buy the rest. And so they buy more of their uniform. Their paycheck has to have at least minimum wage left in that paycheck from those deductions. Now, that doesn't mean insurance, because that's a voluntary deduction. But if it's for tools of the trade, if you have them, they have to buy their own knives if they're working at a restaurant. If you're deducting that from their check, if they make $7.25 an hour, you cannot make any deductions because they have to take home at least that minimum wage in their check when you're doing deductions. Register shortages. So I've worked with a lot of financial institutions in the past, and there have been a few that say, oh, your drawer's short, I'm taking it out of your check. One, it just gives me the shivers for someone to have to do that. But two, you can't do that. That is an illegal deduction below minimum wage.
So you could do it if it didn't affect the minimum wage?
Correct, yes. But you can't do it below the minimum wage. So when we're looking at the Fair Labor Standards Act, now let me say real quick. We're talking about rules that affect non-exempt employees. So these are your regular employees. We're going to talk about exempt. Exempt means they're exempted from these rules. Those are typically what we consider our salaried employees. Exempt and non-exempt do not equate to salary hourly. Those words are not interchangeable. So if you have an employee handbook, if you have things, refer to them when you're talking about overtime and so forth as exempt and non-exempt. You can have salaried, non-exempt employees. However, just because they're salary, they get paid on a salary basis, you still have to pay them overtime for working over 40 hours. So keep that in mind when we're talking about these. So under the Fair Labor Standards Act, you are required to pay your employees for any hours worked. Now, some of that seems, yeah, of course, if they're there, they're working, we have to pay them. We have to make sure that our employees are not working off the clock. And I've seen employees come in and like, it's not good yet. I just want to get this done. And they come in real early and it gets stuff done. And then they clock in and they think they're being good. And they're like, no, I don't want to be paid. I should have had it done yesterday. I'm just going to do it. And then I'll pay it. If we know about it, we need to pay. It should be more of a, you're not following instructions type of thing. But if we know they worked it, we need to pay them. Same thing with overtime. They work overtime. We didn't give out permission. I've had managers say, well, I'm not paying them because I didn't approve it. But they worked it. So you're going to go ahead and pay them for that overtime, but you can counsel them for not following instructions. Yes.
Overtime is considered more than 40 hours per week or more than 80 hours per pay period.
Overtime, and we'll talk about that in a minute, is 40 hours in a 7-day period. Then we'll talk about defining that in a minute. So included in hours worked, on call, in training, traveling, sleep time. So on call. So I have it used to be a pager, now it's a cell phone. And if I get called, I got to go to the office. I'm an IT person. And the system goes down. So I have to carry my cell phone with me at all times. I can't go out and get drunk, and I can't leave the city. I am still able to do my normal life activities, so I don't have to be paid while I'm on call. Now, if I have to go to the building and wait for someone to call me, but I'm stuck at that one location, then I should be paid while I'm on call. Even though I'm not physically I'm restricted in my normal life activities. So that, in that situation, those folks would need to be paid. So we need to include all hours. Now, rest and meal breaks. A lot of people think that they're required. Federally and in the state, lunch breaks are not required by law. You can work your employees from 8 to 5, no break. Now, in some states, like California, every 4 hours, you do have to give them a break. But again, in Texas, there is no law, and federally, there is no law. But if someone's working an 8-hour day, it has been proven that physical, mental rest is important for the rest of the day. So most people do 30 minutes to an hour lunch. When it comes to pay, if it's a break, if you give them a 15-minute break, that is considered work hours. It has to be a break of 20 minutes or more for you to be able to not count it as non-work time. So if you do a 15-minute break in the morning, a 15-minute break in the afternoon, and half-hour lunch, you can't say, okay, that's an hour off. Those 2 15-minute breaks are paid.
Okay. My question is, if you just go in the back, sit, taking that lunch, you want to clock out. If you leave the building, I'm going to clock out.
Okay.
Is that?
Yeah, you can. The regulations are not going to prohibit you from doing extra nice things to your employees. So that's
But making them clock out to leave, it was for liability purposes. I don't want them on my clock while they didn't have a car accident or what.
Oh, yeah. And you can, so if I'm eating my lunch and something happens, I may jump up and stir the fudge or whatever and then go back to eat. And that way they're not getting in trouble because now they're working. So a true lunch that is non-paid, people should not be working. Someone takes some of they're eating their lunch and reviewing the paperwork. That's working. When I used to, in the corporate world, I used to eat at my desk all the time and do my work. Wasn't an issue since I was exempt, but if I was non-exempt, a lot of employers make rules that you cannot eat at your desk, you have to eat in the break, you have to get away because you're tempted to do work. If someone says, hey, I need your help, and you run out to get help, and then you go back, then they're working while they're at lunch. Another thing with like the cell phones and the email, people at night checking their emails, and managers expecting their employees to reply on the weekend and at night. Those non-exempt employees, if they do that, they have to put that on the timesheets. They need to be paid for that. Those are things that you could be challenged from your employees. Well, so they expect me to respond. Don't email them in the weekends. Tell them don't look at your email on the weekends. And if you do, we got to record it.
All right, so tell me more about sleep time, because man, at McDonald's, they could have done about sleep time. We're thinking, man.
You know what? I had a client in this last year, we fired 2 people for sleeping on the job. It's like, wake up, do you need to go home and rest? Okay, go home, and they come back all refreshed tomorrow, and they come back the next day and they fall asleep at their desk. You think it's, I never thought in 1 year that would happen. But so going back to the meal breaks, a break of 30 minutes or more does not have to be paid. And so, unfortunately, law says 20 minutes or less, and then 30 minutes or more, like this 25 minutes. You can count that as a lunch. But if it's less than 20 minutes, it is paid. Now, trade and travel. So if you require someone to go to training, let's say y'all are non-exempt and your boss said you have to go to this meeting, it relates to your job, this would be considered paid time. Now, it doesn't have to be considered paid time if the attendance is outside regular work hours. Attendance is voluntary. Course, lectures, meeting, job are not job related, and the employee does not perform any productive work at Tracy. So I know most employers, they'll send their employee to a seminar during the day or whatever. Those are usually going to be hours worked. Those are going to be paid work time. Now you have folks that, it would be really good if you have some more Excel training and they set those folks to the community college that I'll pay for it, but you do it whenever you want to. Those are typically not hours worked.
Okay, question. We go to a event every year. Carol, I'd say, Carol, I pay for the plane ticket, I pay for the hotel, and I pay her while we're at the convention. I don't pay her once we come back, so, once we leave. Is that? So we go to this convention. So I pay her when we get for the hours that we're there, but then, we'll leave and go have dinner. I don't have to pay her for all that, do I?
Okay, so that's under travel time. So let's talk about that. So normal work, I'm home, I go to work, I clock in. That is not paid time, of course. Let's say you have 2 locations. I go, I clock in at the first location, and they say, I need for you to go over there. I don't clock out. So I'm paid for that travel time to that next location. So that's, when I'm required to do that. I go home for the night, and then you call me back to work in an emergency situation. I'm paid. My clock starts when I leave the house. Now, travel that takes someone like out of town. Let's say you assign someone to go to Waco. There's a conference in Waco on a Monday morning. They have to leave their house at 6 o'clock in the morning. They get there at 8. They attend the seminar. They drive home. They get home at 6 o'clock at night. Travel is out of town. That is all in one day. All of that travel hours are considered work hours. So when I leave my house, you can deduct what it would take to get to the office. So from 6 to 8, driving to Waco is hours worked. Attending the seminar that I'm required to go to, hours worked. Minus lunch, I can clock out for lunch. Driving back, and then driving back is considered hours worked. Now, travel that requires overnight stay. I go to a conference in Chicago, and we leave on a Sunday at 3, and we get there, we have dinner, the next morning we start. Tuesday, we go till 3, we go to the airport, we get home at 9 o'clock at night. Okay. Travel that falls across normally scheduled work hours is compensable. So we need to record those hours. So on Sunday, it doesn't matter what day it is. So I normally work 8 to 5. So I'm going to look 8 to 5. Sunday from 3 to 5. Those are hours that I'm going to pay for. Monday, we're going to the seminar. I'm going to pay for those hours that person is required to be in those seminars. Now, that they go out to dinner at night, all that kind of stuff, no. 3 o'clock, the seminar's over. We go to the airport. The clock stops at 5 because those are my normal. So I'm still traveling after 5, but I'm not paying for those hours. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So it's weird how they travel one day, travel overnight. Driving, if I'm driving the group to San Antonio for a conference, I'm the one who's working. Maybe it's a Sunday and I'm driving. I'm going to be on the clock. The rest of the people who are sleeping are not, if it's all in the day.
Go to the bathroom, right?
Well, that would be me. But yeah, any questions? So this is what you need to include in those hours worked. Now, overtime. what we asked about overtime. Overtime is time and a half for anything worked over 40 hours in a 7-day period. Now, work week, period of 168 hours during a 7 consecutive 24-hour periods. You can define your work week for overtime purposes however you want. A lot of folks define it as Sunday through Saturday. I have some clients that I have one that does Saturday through Friday. I have one that does Thursday to Wednesday. And the reason why they do Thursday to Wednesday is because if they have Saturday hours, then they have some time to maybe you work 4 hours Sunday, so Monday come in an hour late. So you can adjust the schedule so they don't hit that 40 plus hours. As long as when you set it for everyone and you keep it there. You can't just keep floating it out and now it's this and now it's this, now it's this. Because they'll look at it as you're avoiding to try paying overtime. But you can set your work week, whatever works best for you. So if you work, again, over 40 hours in that work week, there is no such thing as a 2-week averaging. So you have 2 weeks in a payroll period. So your payroll is 2 weeks in, and 1 week is 42 hours. The next week is 38 hours. So it says 80 hours, but there's 2 hours of overtime in that check because that week had 42 hours. And I know there's people who say, if I work extra this week, can I take a day off next week? Okay, but you're going to pay them overtime because there is no averaging them 2 weeks. Each week stands alone. And so when you're computing overtiming, you look at the regular rate of pay. The regular rate of pay includes all of the payments, tips, commissions, incentives, when you're calculating overtime. So to calculate the hours, total count divided by the total hours is the regular rate. Now, this will come into play. Where'd they go? If you do incentives, a lot, and I would say that 80% of the people I've ever worked with don't even know about this. To calculate overtime, let's say, if I show this example, it will look better. You made $9 an hour. And we said that if you sold a certain amount you would get $10 for each widget you sold. So you get $10 in bonus for the week. And you worked 48 hours. So if you can see from here, let's see, this is have a light on it.
Damn.
So if you see from here, 48. So I'm going to take how many hours I worked that week, and I'm going to multiply it by 9. Then I'm going to take that number and add $10 to it. So it's going to be 442. Then I'm going to take that and divide it by the 48. The 921 is the rate that I compute my overtime on. So I normally make 9. I'm not doing 8 hours at $9 an hour. I have to add that $10 in and recalculate my hourly rate to do my overtime. Now, if this $10 is just, I just think you're great, here's $10. If it's discretionary, if it's that, it does not need to be included. It's not considered compensable in this area. But if it is an incentive, if it is something that was promised, if you do this, okay, do this, it needs to be added back in to recalculate the overtime. Does that make sense? And, if you don't have overtime, it's not an issue. If your employees are normally at 38 to 40 hours a week and you never really have overtime, this doesn't matter. And if you don't do bonuses, this doesn't matter. But you've got to add all of that compensation, those things we talked about, into the regular rate of pay to calculate the overtime. Any questions before I move into exempt, non-exempt? So, as I said before, what we just talked about was the regulations. This is what you're required to do. However, the Department of Labor has said there are some positions that can be exempt from this. There are 5 tests that you would look at to determine if a position can be considered exempt from these regulations. Now, there's the executive, administrative, professional, computer, and outside sales. So we're going to talk about these a little bit in detail. Now, here is what was overturned. The salary minimum that someone has to make in order to be exempt is $35,568. What was supposed to take place, July 1st, they changed it to $43,888. And then it was supposed to go to $58,000 January 1st. So these got wiped off the table. So they are no longer in effect. So it goes back to $35,568. Why was this so contentious? Why did people not want this to happen? Businesses didn't want it to happen. Businesses want to have their employees as exempt. They don't want to have to pay overtime. By raising the salary, it makes it harder for business to classify positions as exempt. Thus, more people are eligible for overtime. And so I know on social media, I've seen these things about, your overtime is being taken away. Maybe. But honestly, I think if someone was making 35, they're probably still not exempt. 43 may not be exempt, because we're going to go over what these tests are, and even those numbers I think are low. It should be difficult to qualify a position as exempt. If you have an organization and 50% of your employees are exempt, I would question that. It should be difficult. As we go through these tests, if there's ever a question, should it be exempt or non-exempt, it's safer to say a position is non-exempt. You won't have issues. The Department of Labor comes in and says, this position should be exempt. Why are you paying them overtime? Doesn't typically happen. But if they come in and they audit you and they say, these people you're classifying them as exempt, but they really should be non-exempt, that's where you're going to get the fines. That's where they're going to go to the employee and say, how many overtime hours do you think you worked in the last 2 years? And they're going to make up some number, and you're going to have to debate it, and you're going to have to pay that back overtime, and you're going to have to pay fines. So it's fine. Again, if you don't have overtime issues, it shouldn't be a big issue, but it's safer to play on that side. So let's talk about the executive test. Again, you have to make that minimum 35. And then on this one, so you would go through each test and you would go, yes, yes, yes. Okay, it's exempt. I would take the job description. I would document why you think it is, put that in your file. Or if you go through this executive test and you say, nope, go to the next one, see if it qualifies under that one. So the executive test, the primary duty is management of an enterprise or customarily recognized department or subdivision. So this position manages a department, manages an organization. That is their primary duty. They are hiring. They are planning work. They are scheduling. They are counseling employees. That is their primary function. So if I were to look at the job description, their number one duty on there says the management of. The next one, customarily and regularly directs the work of 2 or more full-time equivalents. A full-time equivalent is 2 full-timers. It could be 2 part-timers and 1 full-time, because a part-timer is half. So you have to have 2 full-time equivalents. If you are a manager and you have 1 employee, you do not pass this test. And then you have the authority to hire or fire employees, or your recommendations have particular weight. And there's some organization I work with, the president, the owner, whatever, they have the ultimate, but other people could have input on that. So with this one, again, a primary function, some of the issues I see with this are like frontline supervisors. You have in a financial institution, you have a head teller, and they may manage these people, but 50 to 60% of their time, they're doing the same work as their employees. They're considered working supervisors, and working supervisors typically are not considered exempt employees. They are typically non-exempt employees. And again, I'm going to say typically, because I'd have to look at a job description, I'd have to really look at the functions of the job to determine it. But they have to have at least 2 or more, and their primary function is managing. So I'm going to be coaching people all day. I'm going to be talking, I'm going to be planning. Those are going to be my functions under this test.
He said part-time. Do they have to be 20-hour part-timers?
It just says part-time.
Okay, so it doesn't matter, like, it has to add up to 40 hours.
Yeah, I'd say about 1 part-time is half. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. All right, so let's say we go through this. Nope, my position doesn't qualify under this one. So then we will go to the next one, administrative test. Under this one, again, the $35,000 the minimum, paid on a salary basis, and then their functions, office or non-manual work directly related to the management or general business operations of the employer or the employer's customers. And the most important one, exercise of discretion and independent judgment in matters of significance. So we have to look at, okay, what are they doing for the employer? It can't be manual work. It has to be, and if I slip this one, management or general business operations, if they're in the tax area, if they're legal, quality control, marketing, and HR. So, okay, they're in one of these general areas, but do they really exercise independent judgment in matters of significance? So just because someone can really they can do something that really screws up your books and you lose money, or they follow instructions, a loan officer, for example. Most financial institutions have procedures. Okay, if their debt to income is here, if they make this, if they make this, then we can approve the loan. A loan officer typically in most organizations is going to be non-exempt because they're following a list of procedures. An inspector, you have this, what am I looking for? Keys have to be, this tall, and this has to be this wide, because that's what the playbook says. And I'm going into a building and saying, nope, you don't pass. That's not going to make me an independent judgment. I'm following directions. So it's those loan officers who can make exceptions, who can go outside of the policy. Those folks are making independent judgments. And so we really need to look at what kind of decisions are they authorized to make, and what type of impact do those have on our organization? The professional duties test. So let's say they don't pass that one, so we're going to look at this one. This one is the performance of work requiring advanced knowledge in a field of science or learning, customarily acquired by a prolonged course of specialized instruction. If it's high school that's required, it's not going to fit under here. It's something that someone has had to go to school to learn. Doctors, lawyers, teachers are going to fall under this category. Also, performance of work requiring the invention, imagination, originality, or talent in a recognized artistic or creative field. This is where your actors, your musicians, your graphic artists are going to fit into this category of professional. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a master's degree, but it has to be a prolonged study, and that is used in the job. Engineers also fit under this. They have to go to school. They have to learn all this stuff, and then they're applying it in their job. My daughter is an engineer, and she does like plane management and stuff like that. You can't do that out of high school. You've got to learn, and you've got to learn all these different things to be, and she's doing that in her job. So that would qualify people under the professional test. Computer-related occupations. This is one that I see a lot of folks calling IT people exempt, and they probably should be non-exempt. And what I hear from these managers and so forth is saying, well, they work longer hours, and they work, so they have to be exempt. If they are help desk level type people, you say, I'm locked out, and they get in, they unlock you. They set up your computer. Those folks typically are non-exempt employees. It's when you start getting to these analyst levels, the higher level programmers, that are going to fit in this test. So application of systems analysis techniques and procedures, including consultation with users about hardware, software, system functions. The big thing now is the safety, security, IT people, design, testing, creation. Again, on this one, they have to make a little bit more money. They have to make at least $27.63 an hour, $6.84 weekly. So they have their own little separate test. Typically, the IT people, and again, this is kind of evened out. For a long time there, the IT salaries were doing this. They're kind of evened out a little bit, but they have their own salary test. Then we have outside sales. If you have anyone who is truly an outside salesperson, meaning they are working really, I would think, would be outside sales, working away from the employer's business, making sales, obtaining orders. They are going door to door. They are getting out there, and those folks are going to be exempt. Those are the tests to determine if a position is exempt or not. What questions do you have on those before I move forward? So to me, when I look at positions, I would say the majority fall under either the management or the administrative, especially in small businesses. Some of them have lawyers but I would look at the type of decision making those folks are doing and how much manual work is being performed. Owners, there is a part of the regulation that if you're 20% owner, then they consider that as probably a exempt position under that. They also have a highly comp, which I didn't put a slide up there for. If someone makes at least $107,000 a year, and again, that one was going to go up, but that one came back down. And they are manager, they meet one of the qualifications under each of those tests, they can be considered exempt. So hopefully if someone's being paid that, they're an exempt level position. Now, for exempt level positions, they are paid a salary no matter how many hours they work. If it takes them 10 hours to do the job, it takes them 80 hours to do the job, they get paid their salary. Now, comp time. Let's talk about comp time. There is no such thing as comp time. So I worked 40 hours, I worked 2 hours extra. I'm just going to give you 2 hours off. In the public sector, there is such a thing as comp time. So you work for the government, they do have comp time. But in the private sector, there is no such thing as comp time. So for non-exempt employees, they get paid, period, the end. They have tried to pass legislation that will allow private sector employers to use comp time, but it's never passed. The other is with exempt employees. You have a salaried employee. I've seen where these exempt employees keep track of how many hours they're working, and they're like, you know what? I've worked 45 hours. I'm just going to take 5 hours off this week. I would try not to count hours of exempt employees. When you start counting their hours, you're treating them like a non-exempt employee, and you could hurt their exemption status. So you may, as a manager, say, you know what, Jim, you've worked really hard. I noticed you've been just putting in all the hours. Go ahead and take Monday off. So that should be a manager preference, but not an employee who keeps track of their hours. Now, an exempt employee is paid for that week, no matter how many hours they worked. Now, if they had jury duty, say they called up for jury duty, you are required by law to allow them to go have jury duty. But you're not required to pay them. But a lot of employers will pay for that time. And some will say, we'll pay for a week, and then after that, we're not going to pay. Get the grand jury, and you're gone all the time. So some people put a cap on how much jury duty that they'll pay. But if you have an exempt employee, if they work at all during the week, if they call in and get their messages and call one client back, but they're gone all week, they are paid for that entire week. The only time you cannot pay an exempt employee is if they don't work at all during the week, because you're paying for that whole week. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule. So I have an exempt employee. They're paid for the week, but they are absent from work from 1 or more full days for personal reasons. So I'm like, I want to go to the park. I want to do this with my family today. I'm going to take the day off. You can deduct a full day out of their paycheck. If you have a sick leave program and you pay sick leave and then they've exhausted it, then they're missing more days. Let's say they have off every other Friday for chemo. Once they run out of sick leave, you can then start deducting full days for those days missed out of their paycheck. Only in full days can you deduct unless you have family medical leave. And you have a bona fide family medical leave policy, you can then start deducting in partial day increments.
Yeah.
So full days only, taking that out of their check. If to offset for jury duty fees, military pay, I don't ever see anyone do that anymore. I mean, Tarrant County, what, you get $20 or less, and then it costs you $40 to park down there. So I would hate to take that away from people. Unpaid. So if you suspend someone, if you catch them doing something wrong and you send them out for suspension, you can deduct full days increments from their check. If someone starts on a Tuesday, you're only going to pay them 3 days. If they end on a Wednesday, you're going to pay them 3 days. So those are the exceptions to the full day payments. Otherwise, they're paid for a full week of pay. Does that make sense? So the Fair Labor Standards Act required that we keep records. Now, they don't say how we do timekeeping. There's no regulations that say you have to have a time clock, you have to have a time sheet. You just have to keep track of personal information on your employees, hours and days when a work week begins, total hours worked each workday and each week, total daily or weekly straight time earnings, overtime pay, deductions, total wages. So these are the things that you need to keep. Now, my recommendation. So some people use a time clock still, a little thing. Some people have a computer. When they log in, it clocks them in. Some people still use timesheets where I fill out, I came in at this time, I left it. However you want to do it is okay. You can pay to the minute on your pay. You can round to the nearest 5, 10, or 15 minutes. So when I'm saying that, so if you have a time clock and someone clocks in, they're supposed to work 8 to 5, they clock in at 8:05, it'll round, they'll be paid from 8 o'clock. If they come in at 7:55, it'll round to 8 o'clock. So a lot of time clocks you can see when they actually punched in, but it'll round. And so you're paying in quarter-hour increments as opposed to each little minute that they get. So you can do any way you want to. My suggestion is whatever your employees record, they sign, they approve it, they click somewhere on the timesheet that, yes, these are the hours I worked. And then the manager says, yes, these are the hours they worked. And then you pay it. Because then if anyone comes back and says, well, that's not what I worked. Well, look, you approved it. This is what you said you worked. And so that would be my suggestion, although there is no regulation on how you do it. You just have to keep these records. You have to keep most of these for 3 years. So personnel files, 3 years. Your payroll for 3 years. I usually say like the personnel file and all that stuff, 5 to 7 years, and then you can destroy it. If you have like a 401k and those type of things, there are documents you have to keep longer. But for the most part, 5 to 7 years for a personnel file. Just you don't need me. Waiting, took it so quick. And just
The records keeping part?
She's gonna make it look like
it's 80% of Metro and 50% of innovative ways. We don't take any salary at all from Metro. I pay him CEO salary from Innovative Ways, and I pay myself a salary from Innovative Ways. We don't copy in. We don't be your owners. So pay salary. So, and it's just the two of you? Yeah. And you're an LLC? Yeah, folks. Yeah. Yeah, I don't do that either. Both of us talk about it. I'm like, okay. Yeah, oh my God, we don't clock in. We don't do anything. You pay yourself a salary, and it's going to show in your bank account statement. Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you start hiring people, then yes. Okay. They'll all be our employees. We
Same.
they punch. Yeah. But on us, yeah. Other person, yeah. So okay, God, thank you. You get paid. That's where we spend all our time. We should get paid for Metro. Another thing that is covered under the Fair Labor Standards Act is nursing, breastfeeding. Employers are required to have a room where nursing mothers can go that doesn't have windows, that they can lock, they can have privacy. It can't be a bathroom. Now, if you have fewer than 50 employees, they're going to be a little bit more lenient if you just can't have it. I've worked with small employers before, and like the manager will give up their office for 20 minutes. So an employee can go in there. So making accommodations as best you can, but allowing these folks to have reasonable time away from their work in order to do this.
It's still pretty bumpy job.
Now, a couple things that FLSA does not require. Vacation, holidays, severance pay, and sick pay. You are not required by federal law or state law to offer vacation, PTO, holidays, holiday pay. Now, the state of Texas does require. They will enforce your policies. So if you have a policy on vacation that says, we'll give you 2 weeks, if you leave, we'll pay you your unused vacation. I've had employers call me say, nope, I think they took money. I'm not paying them for their vacation. But the Texas Workforce Commission doesn't care. They'll look at your policy and say, you owe that person their unused vacation pay. But you can put in there, we do not pay unused vacation, PTO on termination. They'll enforce that. Same thing with severance. If you have a severance policy that says, well, if we let you go, we'll give you a week for every year of service, they'll enforce it. But nothing requires that you do so. Meal or rest periods, holidays, again, there's nothing that requires you to do so. Double time for working a weekend. I know some of the grocery stores offer that. If you work a holiday, you get paid double time. That's just a benefit that they have. There is nothing in the regulations that say that is required. There is no rules that say you have to give someone a notice. Now, we are at will. Does everyone know what that means? We're all at will employers. We can fire someone at any time for any reason. They can quit at any time for any reason, with or without notice. I always tell the employees that, at my clients, but hopefully no one is like, I'm that well employer, I can just get rid of you because I want to. Hopefully there's reasons, but there is that law out there. So you're not required to give anyone a notice. You're not required to put it in writing and give it to someone. It's always a good idea when you're firing someone to give them a clue about why, because otherwise they're going to make things up and they could come back on you, and then you have to prove that that's not why you did it.
It's like, someone asked me a question the other day. They have an employee who has now a disability, and they can't perform the essential functions of the job. And what do you do? And, if you're under 15 employees, there's different thresholds on different laws. There's local laws and so forth. But really the best thing to do is have a conversation with those folks and say, okay, these are the essential functions. This is what I need for you to do. How can you do these with or without a reasonable accommodation? And reasonable is really a sliding scale. If you go to American Airlines, their reasonableness is going to be a lot bigger than someone that gets sued. Someone can't bend over and pick things up. There are public accessibility rules with all of that, so that could be an issue. But yeah, if they're having to get up, I know where your buckets are up there. How are they going to get up there to get that bucket down? Lower tables. Okay, so pay raises. I'm saying if you're not going to do pay raises, you're probably going to lose people, but they're not anything that's required. I would say keep up with competition or you're going to lose. You got to pay your employees fair for what you do. Not necessarily, like someone called me the other day and their employee is going to work for the college and the manager's like, they're going to work and make more money than me at the college. Well, they're doing a totally different job. So you can't compare that job to this job. But this job compared to other similar is you're being paid very fairly. So, okay. So in summary, my suggestions to you would be, one, to review your timekeeping practices. You know, how are you calculating overtime? What is your work week? Do you have that work week defined? And are you following the rules of not taking 2 weeks? Are you making sure that people are clocked in when they are working? Again, looking at how you're calculating that overtime. Are you doing incentives? And then look at the exempt, non-exempt classifications. I would take their, you know, we can send out these slides. I would look at each test and say that the decisions, document what are those decisions that they're making. So if the Department of Labor were to ever come visit you, you could pull out and say, look, this is why I made these decisions. And then, are your records being kept? Are your records locked up? Are they in fireproof cabinets? Now, a lot of stuff now is online. Do you have online records? And how safe are your records online? Those Social Security numbers. Do you have Social Security numbers on your applications? I would take those off. Look at some of those confidential issues and how you're handling all those documents. Are you doing background checks? What are you doing when you get rid of them? Are you shredding your documents? So look at your record keeping practices. Well, I appreciate y'all for coming, and if you have any further questions, you guys know how to get hold of me. All right.